Jude Law's mysterious Star Wars, Skeleton Crew character, Jod N.A. Nowod, could be Star Wars' newest Jedi, but I think his backstory is more complicated than that. Jod is one of the key characters in Skeleton Crew, yet it's challenging to get a clear read on him, especially given his many aliases and deceptive nature. Star Wars has also continued to be cagey about whether Jod is truly a Jedi, even with just 2 episodes left in Skeleton Crew. Initially, it seemed Jod was a Jedi, as the show's creators indicated they wanted to create a new kind of Jedi, and there was a reference to him being a Jedi in Skeleton Crew's trailer. While Jod is Force-sensitive, though, there have been many hints in Skeleton Crew's first 6 episodes that he isn't a full-fledged Jedi, if he was ever a Jedi at all. Based on all the evidence, I think I may have figured out what Jod's background really is, and it would have interesting implications for Star Wars movies and TV shows. Jod N.A. Nowod clearly knows the basics of the Jedi teachings. But he doesn't really understand them. Jod and Vim sitting down in Skeleton Crew, 2024. Skeleton Crew Episode 5 provided some of the most convincing evidence so far that Jod may have previously had some sort of affiliation with the Jedi Order. Towards the beginning of the episode, Jod happens upon Vim, who is crying about missing his father, who is on Atatin, and his mother, who died some time ago. Jod clearly doesn't have much experience comforting children, as he at first looks rather uncomfortable when he realizes Vim is crying. Interestingly, Jod then seems to fall back on Jedi teachings to help Vim. The first example of this came when Jod explained the issues with attachment to Vim, harking back to the well-known rule of the Jedi Order that the Jedi should not have attachments, as they can lead one down a dark path. Jod then repeated a phrase once uttered by Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace: "Your focus determines your reality." Given how exact Jod's verbiage was, it seems this was a Jedi tenet that both Jod and Qui-Gon were reiterating. What is most interesting is that while Jod seems to understand the basics of these Jedi teachings, he consistently gets them wrong. The Jedi were against attachments, but that was because attachment is linked to feeling possession of or control over others. Jod's explanation to Vim was more in line with selfish aims of looking out for oneself first, or only. Likewise, his use of the statement "your focus determines your reality" reinforces a focus on the self and one's own desires rather than the need to find peace within oneself, as Qui-Gon and the Jedi intended it. Jod's use of the Force has been inconsistent at best. Jod has seemed more like Hajar than a true Jedi. Hajar Estri looking shocked in Obi-Wan Kenobi. In addition to misunderstanding the Jedi teachings, Jod's use of the Force hasn't suggested he's a Jedi. The earliest example of Jod's Force sensitivity was when he lifted the keys and brought them into the cell where he and the kids were being held on Port Borgo. At the time, this rudimentary use of the Force seemed questionable. In fact, Jod's use of the Force in that scene felt reminiscent of Hajar, the fake Jedi from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. He has since used the Force a handful of times in Skeleton Crew, but it has never been a major Force feat or an exceptional Force ability. More notably, when SM-33 was attacking the group of children, Jod didn't use the Force. Instead, he ran at SM-33 and turned him off. Presumably, if Jod was a trained Jedi, his first move at that moment would have been to use the Force to stop the droid. Jod being a child during Order 66 would explain so much. If Jod's Jedi training stopped when he was a child, these clues would make sense. Jod being raised in the Jedi Order only to have his training cut short by Order 66 when he was just a child would explain all these oddities and the inconsistency regarding whether he is a Jedi. His knowledge of the Jedi teachings would be due to his time in the Jedi Order as a child, during which he would have learned these concepts and heard these adages. However, his young age and curtailed time there would have impacted his comprehension. It makes sense that he would have taken the most basic notions away from his time with the Jedi but not fully grasped the meaning of what he'd been taught. Similarly, his limited use of the Force, and his failure to use the Force against SM-33, could be explained by his being one of the survivors of Order 66. If he was just a youngling when Order 66 happened, his Force abilities would be rudimentary, just as they seem to be in Skeleton Crew. This would also explain why he has empathy and a soft spot for the kids but ultimately turns against them, as he has learned he must rely on himself. As a youngling survivor of this horrific event, he would understand what it's like to be a scared child alone in the galaxy. In the end, though, bearing witness to these atrocities would likely have pushed Jod to prioritize his own survival above all else. This would also explain why if this was indeed Jod's backstory, it would be an interesting update to the legacy of the Jedi. Many survivors of Order 66 have emerged over the years, such as Grogu and Kanan Jarrus, but Jod becoming a pirate and using the Force only for selfish aims would be a new spin on a character who grew up in the Jedi Order and survived Order 66. With just 2 episodes of Star Wars, Skeleton Crew left, hopefully Star Wars will soon reveal the truth about this Jedi.